Hello and welcome everyone to another InventRight webinar. We got a great one for you tonight. My name is Andrew Krause. I co-founded InventRight with Stephen Key over 20 years ago, and we've been coaching and mentoring inventors ever since. Stephen and myself are over there on the left, and we have an incredible speaker tonight. He's going to talk about developing professional relationships. His name is Mike Bowling, and he's a very prolific toy inventor. He created a product back in the 80s called the Pound Puppies, and I remember this. I'm 50, going on 51. I worked in a toy store at the time. I remember this product, and it was huge. I'll let Mike talk about the sales.
No, wait a minute. Come on, give me a minute here.
Yeah.
Give me a minute, Andrew.
What?
I have to talk a little bit about that time because that was probably in the mid 80s.
Yeah.
And I became a plush designer and working for Worlds of Wonder, and Pound Puppies comes out, and then this thing is like huge. And it was such a simple idea, but it had a great hook, and I've always been in awe of that product. And it's back. I mean, you can buy it now, which is really fantastic. So when I had the pleasure of meeting Mike recently, and talking about the old days and even the new days, and realizing he has so many fascinating stories about his journey of being a toy inventor that I just heard a few before we came live. And Mike, I cannot thank you enough for being a good friend. So thank you for coming on tonight.
Well, thank you for having me. I really enjoyed, the first thing we did, Stephen and Andrew. I've enjoyed talking to you. You're a couple of great guys, and you're a blessing for the invention community.
Well, thank you very much, Mike. Okay, Mike, where do you want to start with this journey? Because you've gone from working early in the day at Ford, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you come up with this great idea concept. So where do you want to start tonight? Because this is your night to share your story. Where would you like to start?
Well, I guess at the beginning, here's one of the things with this quarantine, stay in place. I've been living in my warehouse for 30 days. I thought I'd finally get it organized, and I've gone through every box that I've put in there over 36 years. And it was a fun journey for me because I was pulling out a lot of things I'd forgotten, and a lot of treasures that I've been looking for 10 or 15 years. So it's been a fun event. But I was able to pull these items out that I hadn't seen in 20 years and take pictures of them. And that's what I was going to share tonight with your guests that are listening in tonight. And I thought it would be fun just to start actually at the beginning. And I've actually got a slide, Andrew, if you want to put it up, of what the very first handmade sample Pound Puppies and boxes that we had. And so those were the first Pound Puppies that were ever created. They're handmade, hand painted. And I had a small box company in Cincinnati make the boxes that I designed. I was sitting at a Wendy's restaurant with some poster board I'd gotten from KB. And I'm not an artist, but had the puppy and kind of tried to figure out what size the box should be, and drew it out and kind of figured out what I wanted on the outside of it. And the box company helped me bring it to what you saw there. But that was the very beginning, and those are the ones that I carried around every time I was making a presentation to a toy company, and I would show those and tell the story. And as you said, the simplicity of the concept is what actually at the end of the day made it so successful.
Now Mike, those are prototypes, right?
Yes, exactly.
And who made those prototypes? Because they look pretty darn good.
Yeah. I was working with a designer at the time, and she was very, very talented. And we had a meeting and decided what we wanted the dogs to look like, and she made them. Excuse me. I read something many years ago, and I think this is something that scares a lot of inventors. And I've had ideas in the past, and I would always go, oh, I don't know how to do that. I'm not a chemical engineer. I'm not an engineer. I don't know how to do this. I can't sew a pattern. I can't do any of those types of stuff. But Henry Ford many years ago said, you don't have to know how to do everything. You just have to know how to pull the talent together to make it happen. And that's an important component of developing your prototypes that you're going to be presenting to different people. It's important to get a work for hire agreement when you work with somebody, just to protect your rights and your concept. But that's what I did. I started from scratch. And a funny side story for you, the boxes that you're looking at right now with the little pound puppy in them, I was running around selling them, trying to make a little money and to promote the idea at the start. And I was selling them at Ford Motor Company where I worked. And it got to a point where when I would come into work, people would bark at me as I was walking down the aisle. I'd hear these little barking sounds. And I told the guys, I said, listen, I signed it. Can you imagine? I'm a factory worker and I signed this dog and gave it, sold it to him and said, someday this is going to be very famous and it's going to be worth a lot of money. Well, about 6 months ago, Greg Battersby, my licensing attorney, he called me. He said, Mike, guess what we just saw on the internet on an auction website? One of your original pound puppies sold for $5,000 on at an auction. And I thought, well, see, I did tell those guys the truth when I was selling them the pound puppy many years ago.
Oh, wonderful. Wonderful. Mike, before we go forward, what was the aha moment that come up with this concept?
The aha moment, I actually remember the moment and where I was because I kind of slammed my fist on the steering wheel of my car and I said, this is it. This is the right idea. And I was driving in Middletown, Ohio, right past the Kmart store. And my daughter was with me. And I had purchased a soft sculpture doll at Christmas time. And she really became enamored with it and took it everywhere and pretended she was feeding it and stuff. And I was looking at that and I was thinking, how can an inanimate object have that much emotional appeal? And if there's two things people love on this earth, it's their kids and their pets. And some people treat their pets as if they're their kids. And when I was growing up, the only place we ever went to get a puppy was at the pound. And so it just, the idea, and then, once you get an idea how it starts to grow and you add pieces to it and you're starting to think it through more and how everything should work. And, that little box that you see there had newspaper on the bottom of it in there, just regular newspaper, like you would put in a cage or something for a crate or something for a puppy. And there's a dog tag in the back that you could get the name on, and it had a collar on it and everything. And so we really tried to make it a realistic experience for the child to pick the one that they wanted. One of the things that I did that I didn't realize was genius at the time. I had no idea. It was because I'd worked on an assembly line. I figured the only way we were going to be able to mass produce all these puppies so that they would be a huge variety of puppies was to create one body style, but add some different sculpting in the face, some different ear styles, short, medium, long, perky, different colors, and some with spots, some without. And that would give us the ability to mass produce so a child could really pick their own puppy out when they, but something that a company would be able to do in mass production.
Mike, would it be safe to say that without that uniqueness, it wouldn't have sold the same as it did?
You're exactly right. You know what? I tell people, I didn't invent, plush dogs. There were plush dogs before me, and Steifen Gund had very beautiful, realistic looking dogs that had been around for years and years and years. And there have been many puppies, past pound puppies, and a lot of knockoffs too. But pound puppies carved out within the dog world its own identity. it had a name without having a name. It was a pound puppy. It came from the pound, but it wasn't named, and the child didn't determine what sex it was till they got it home. One of our strengths was that pound puppies was the first truly, this, I think it was written up in the Wall Street Journal, I can't remember, said we were the first truly unisex toy because we sold 60% to girls and 40% to boys. A boy could pick one out and call it Spike, and it could be tough just like him. And the little girl could pick it out, and it could be Susie and sweet, and she could put a little dress on it, you know. So that was one of our other big strengths, is that we appealed both to boys and girls.
Mike, for those people that aren't familiar with pound puppies, how many of these little guys did you sell?
You know, it's funny when we get down to another picture that I've got for you. I want to tell you, I want to answer your question right now. We added, when pound puppies, you know, had gone through its heyday. One time I sat down and had my accountant, you know, go through our royalty statements, and we had sold 200 million pound puppies worldwide, in a wide variety of shapes and sizes and different ones, mini ones and newborn ones. And then we had pound purries too, which came out the second year after pound puppies. And, you know, I finally figured out why. It only did, which was nothing to complain about, it did 60% of the volume that the pound puppies did. And then it dawned on me one day, it's because the other 40% were the boys that were buying pound puppies, and the majority of boys didn't want to buy a kitten. And so it increased by 60%, but we sold 200 million pound puppies worldwide.
Wow.
I know.
That's a lot. I mean, people need to think on that. That's some serious volume.
But yeah, put up the next slide, and I've got a story to kind of explain to you, you know, why I think it happened that way. As you'll see, it's Bill Hanna and Joe Barbera holding two original pound puppies, and I've got a great story for you on how that picture occurred. So in the spring of 1984, before I had ever licensed pound puppies to anyone, anywhere, I got this idea that they'd make a great cartoon show. So I put two handmade pound puppies, you can see them, they had a little Christmas outfit on them, in a box, and I wrote a handwritten letter, and I sent it to Hanna-Barbera, and I said, I've invented this toy. I think it would make a great cartoon show. If you're interested, call me. Well, the next week, I got a call from Joe Terratero. I was still working in the factory at Ford, and I hadn't licensed pound puppies yet. And he says, Bill Hanna and Joe Barbera loves your concept. He'd like you to come out to Hollywood and meet with him. And almost took my breath away. And when I hung the phone up, I had to sit down. And we made arrangements for me to come out there and meet with him, and about a potential cartoon show. And as you can see, I've got this gorgeous suit on. I thought I had to have a suit and ran out and bought a new one. And they were very casual when I got there. They weren't into the suit and tie thing. That was where I thought I needed to be. But here's the point, big point that Joe Barbera said to me when I walked into the office, and he was holding the pound puppy that you see there. He said, I love this idea, this concept, the minute I saw it. And he says, do you know why? He said, I don't have to explain to a child what it is, what it's about. The storylines are natural, and it translates all over the world, even where they don't have pounds. Children know about adopting and taking care of a homeless pet. And he was right. And it did translate in 54 countries around the world for us. And he said, we'd love to make a cartoon show. And I said, okay, whenever I get a licensee in the United States, I'll put you guys together and we can figure out, you know, how to do it. And so Tonka took the license, and I put them with Hanna-Barbera, and they partnered together to produce a cartoon show on ABC for 2 years. And the first year in 1985, they did a pilot, a Christmas, 1 hour long Christmas pound puppy show. That was the pilot for pound puppies, cartoon show.
Wow, what a great story. Mike, tell me, how did you do that? How did you get their name? I mean, back then, it wasn't the internet. So did you just pick up the phone? I mean, how did you make that connection?
you know, I'm sorry, I can't. Let's go back. When I was growing up, all the cartoon shows I watched, the Jetsons, the Flintstones, I'm trying to think of all of them, you know, it was always Hanna-Barbera.
Yep.
And so when the idea of a cartoon show came to mind, I says, well, it has to be Hanna-Barbera.
Mm.
And I can't remember how I found their address right now in Hollywood. But I found it. Like I said, I put the two handmade in a box and I wrote a letter. And I think it's important. The reason I wanted to share that story is I think inventors should never be afraid to approach anyone. The worst they're going to do is tell you no. But look at what happened to me, because I wrote this letter and sent it to Hollywood, and it's not apparently the proper way to approach someone in Hollywood with a concept. But it apparently worked, because we ended up with a cartoon show on ABC for 2 years.
But Mike, that's been your whole attitude from day one, isn't it? To reach out to people and show it and not be too afraid of it. Because didn't you just do this all the time? I mean, when you were starting to try to license it, weren't you reaching out to companies? I mean, you're pretty fearless, weren't you?
Well, yeah, you know what? Here's a lot of people don't understand this, but I didn't do Pound Puppies for money. I had worked in a factory for, at the time, probably 17 years. And Ford Motor Company is the greatest company on the face of the earth. I had great benefits. They took care of my family and medical benefits and everything else. And I made a good wage and everything. But to be honest with you, I didn't enjoy working in the factory. And I'd had ideas for many, many years. You know, when you work on an assembly line, the first 7 years I was at Ford, I worked on an assembly line, and you got a lot of time on your hands when you're putting in the same part over and over and over again, and you have a lot of time to think. Well, I had a lot of ideas through those years, but I always had the negativity creep in that I didn't know how to do it, or I didn't have the money, or any of those things. But when the thing came with Pound Puppies, the reason I did it is I wanted to get up and do something that I enjoyed every day. And that in itself was wealth to me. And when I pounded my fist on the steering wheel, that's what I meant by I said, this is it. This is the right idea. And, you know, and I got a lot of rejection from companies. You know, it wasn't easy. And I got $85,000 in debt and owed a lot of people a lot of money. But I just, you know, I told them one way or the other, I'm going to pay you. But I just kept plodding along and determined that worst come to worst, I was going to figure out how to make them and sell them myself.
Okay. Mike, one before we move on, the name is so great as you just told the story, because it tells such a story and everybody connects with. So when did the name, I mean, was it always Pound Puppies in your mind? Did you always have that name? I know you had the concept, but I mean, how did that happen?
Because Pound Puppies was the first thing that came up. I actually thought about making dogs and cats, but I figured that some people don't like a dog, or some person doesn't like a cat, but everybody loves a puppy or a kitten. And so I thought, okay, we're going to make them puppies, and they come from the pound, because that's where I went and got pets my whole life. So I said Pound Puppies, and it had a really nice, you know, ring to it. And as you know, and a lot of inventors out there know, it's hard, you know, to get trademarks sometimes, you know. And once again, I was very, very fortunate that I had Pound Puppies. A little sidebar happened to us after we got out there and things were going well. There was another person that had a trademark that they had before me called Pound Hounds. But the trademark office had issued our trademark saying it wasn't conflicting. But we still had the challenge from the other person, so we had to buy the other trademark to just settle up and make sure there was no arguing over the ownership of the name. But I was very fortunate in the name that I picked, that it did. It told the kids the minute they walked by. Do you know we were, when we went in to retail at Toys R Us, we were the #1 news selling plush at Toys R Us before the TV commercials ever even hit the airwaves. So that proves that the kids got it when they walked by and saw it. They knew what it was,
Okay.
and picked it up.
Nice.
So you've got up the first. Those are the first pound puppies sold in the United States in 1985. And
Okay.
as I told you, we actually came out with pound puppies, and then the newborns the next year, and the kittens the next year, and then the newborn kittens the following year. But those are the first pound puppies that were sold at retail in the United States.
Nice.
And
Very
if you
nice.
put up the next photo, yeah, put up that photo.
Huh.
You talk about getting a rush. I was staying in the Marriott Marquis in New York City for the first toy fair when Pound Puppies was at the toy fair. And I looked out of my window, and on the famous marquee in Times Square was what you see on the screen, the Pound Puppies logo. And I had no idea that Tonka, the toy company, they had bought that and had that ad up there, I guess you'd call it, because it was Toy Fair in New York City. And a lot of the toy people, a big, huge chunk of the toy people and buyers and everybody stayed at the Marriott Marquis. So they saw the same thing when they looked out of their windows. But here I am, I'm pinching myself. And let me tell you something, I pinched myself for 4 years straight, and I still do to today with everything that's happened to me since I started this journey in December of 1983 and started working on it in the spring of '84. So that was just a great feeling to see that. That's why I wanted to share that. I have that picture on my wall here in the office because I ran out there and took that picture.
Thank you.
There, a picture. Remember I told you I've been digging through my archives? So if you look at this picture, you'll see so many different pound puppies, pound puppy slippers, lunch boxes, bed sheets, every kind of pound puppy in every size and shape. And this doesn't even represent not even a tenth or even smaller than that of what over the next 4 years we sold worldwide in 52 countries around the world. And I wanted to put that up because I want people to understand just how far reaching their idea can go from that first slide you saw of just some handmade, hand-painted pound puppies in a box that I designed in a Wendy's store, and to having a cartoon show and all these things. This is how, if you pursue your idea and your dream, how it can go for you.
Mike, I have a question. So you licensed Pound Puppies to a toy company, and it looks like there was a lot of sub-licensing here.
Oh, yeah.
Could you talk a little bit about that so people understand how that works?
Yeah, with sub-licensing, when a brand becomes #1 and is popular, and when we had the cartoon show and Pound Puppies was #1, well, every company in the world that made children's products wanted a license from us to put the Pound Puppies art on all of the things that you see here. And that's a Pound Puppy puzzle up in the front. You can see the lunchbox, tennis shoes. You see Wheatos. That was a cereal in England where every time you bought a box, you got a free Pound Puppy in a little character Pound Puppy inside of it. And so yes, in sub-licensing, we did $200 million in sales in sub-licensed items. And in sub-licensing, they pay you a higher royalty than you get with your regular toy license royalty, because they're riding on the fame. That fame is what's going to sell their product. and so
Okay.
they'll pay a higher royalty for sub-licenses.
Hey, yeah, Mike, tell me this. Was this a um, Happy Meal toy too?
Oh yeah, well I've got to slide down a little further, and
Okay.
you'll see, yeah, there it is. The
Ooh.
Hardee's did a fast food promotion with us, but you see the little pound puppies that were sold there at Hardee's.
Hmm.
They were sold, not given away.
Okay.
They had to buy a Happy Meal, and then for, I don't remember what it was, $2.89 or something. We were one of the first promotional giveaways that they had to pay for,
Hmm.
and they did it at Christmas time the first year, and in 4 weeks sold 14 million. They sold out of every one that was produced for them,
Hmm.
and each week the kid came in and got the meal, and they got a different puppy. There was like 3 different style puppy and one
Okay.
Purry that they would get. And in the 2 years, we sold 28 million pound puppies. In the
Wow.
background, kind of blurred, you can see the Weedos.
Yeah.
We had a Long John Silver's promotion. We had a Dairy Queen promotion through the years. So, but Hardee's was the best one that we had during our
Now,
years.
now I'm going to ask
Did
a
the puppies
technical
come with
question.
French fry grease on them?
Did they come with
eat,
a what now?
eating your French fries and you get grease and ketchup and all over them?
Well, you know what? I'll bet you the kids dipped their French fry into the ketchup and tried to feed it to their puppy.
Yeah.
Hey, Mike, I've got a technical question for you, okay?
Hmm.
That mouth is soft sculpture, isn't it?
Yes, it is. That was part of the, even though we changed to a more plush material that you see with the pound puppies and some even furries and stuff, the sculpting was how we got the different face looks. We had multiple different sculpting styles, and from those styles is how we created. And you know what I always used to tell somebody, if the person sewing the soft sculpture, look at that puppy on the left, the little tan one, for example.
Yep.
If they messed up and they got the stitch not in the exact right place,
Yes.
but let's say a 1/4 inch or 1/2 inch lower on that side, it just looked like a different puppy. It had a cute little crooked smile. So
Okay.
the sculpting, although they were supposed to follow specific guidelines,
Hmm.
if you messed up a little bit, it still was a cute little puppy with just a little different look on its face.
Gave it uniqueness. Who did all the different styles of smiles? I mean, was that you or who did all that?
We did that at the start when I was working with my designer, where
Okay.
we would set with, picture this, I would set with an unsculpted head of the puppy. We first created the body of the puppy. Then I would pinch it and hold it, and we would do it that way. I'd pinch
Got
at a different location. I'd pull down the brow above the dog, and just so through working together, we came up with a
it. Okay.
lot of the different sculpting styles and stuff. And then once we got inside of major toy companies, they had designers, and
Okay.
they worked closely with us, and I had to approve everything, and their designers would come up with different styles and suggestions.
Mhm.
But 95% of all pound puppies line extensions worldwide, I actually developed those throughout the whole life of the toy. I was constantly, people think you license it and you walk away. That's far from it. I was constantly going to the companies and presenting potential line extensions, new
Got it.
ideas and stuff for the pound puppies line.
Now, everybody, just so the reason why I asked that question is because plush, there's a pattern to make a plush animal, right? And you cut it out, you fabric, you cut it out, you sew it up, and you have this stuffed animal. But when you sculpt, it gives it personality, and that's really done by hand. I mean, that's not kind of mechanical. That's really done by hand, although you might have instructions. So I think that was the first time that people were doing that hand sculpting at such a mass scale, I think.
Well, as a matter of fact, remember I told you I had purchased this little boy doll at Christmas time, and its face had been sculpted. So, and the material that it was made out of is what I made the first Pound Puppies out of, and that's where it originated, where I got the idea to do the sculpting and utilize that material.
Was that a Cabbage Patch? Is that what we're talking about?
No, Cabbage Patch was really big right then, and but this was not. This was just a doll made by a craftsperson in a local craft store that I saw and bought. It was real cute, little boy.
Thank you, Mike. Kind of a technical question, but I had to ask.
No. Well, I want to remind everybody, if you guys have a question for Mike, you can type it into the questions box, and we'll try to get to as many as we can at the end. But I kind of have an on-topic question with Mike commenting that, coming up with the iterations and stuff from Phil here. Phil wrote, how much creative control do you have versus the companies that license the idea?
Well, I had total creative control. And I'm not a lawyer, but there is, I believe there's a law that you have to maintain control of your product to maintain, the trademark and copyrights or whatever those rights are. You just can't give it away and license it and just walk away from it. You have to stay involved with it to maintain ownership, or that's the way it was back in the 80s. I'm not a lawyer, and I don't know if that's true today. But you know what? We had it in all our contracts that I had to approve everything before it went to market. So it was a contractual requirement.
But Mike, it was a little bit different in the toy industry because they valued you. Right? Weren't you part of their team, and weren't you part of their family once you started working on it? It wasn't like, here's my idea, I'm going to walk out the door. You were part of it. You were the guy.
Oh, yeah, and I that's what I told you. And we ended up with 52 different countries around the world. We had 28 different licensees. Some of the licensees might cover 4 or 5 countries. And we did this, we only gave Tonka the US rights. And I went around the world and with my agent consultant, Bob Steiner, who knew everybody in the toy business around the world. And we presented it individually in all these countries around the world. And that's where, the topic tonight about relationships. I gained so many relationships with toy partners around the world. And when you get into Europe, back then, the majority of the toy companies that I approached were toy companies that were started by their great-grandfather. Vuli, Irwin Toy up in Canada was, you had the whole family line in there when you went and visited with them. And there was just so many toy companies that I worked with where, like I said, it was a family business, and the relationships that I established with them were very important to me. They were more important to me than the money that I was making, because I figured long term those relationships were, that was going to be where my strength was in the industry. And I always worked with excuse me, I always worked with those companies. And I told somebody once, here, just a second, I'm going to get a little water. Sorry about that. I always worked with those companies, and I had a work philosophy from day one when I started in the toy business. I focused on 3 things. Well, really 2. Number 1, I focused on the product, the toy, because if the product is not right, then it's not going to sell and nothing else is going to happen. So the product was always number 1 with me and putting all my intention into that. Number 2 was working with my partner in any way that I could to help my partner, because at the end of the day, he was the one that was taking the risk and produce commercials, mass produce the product, put it into the marketplace. So I focused on the toy and then my partner, and then I was number 3, because if 1 and 2 work, of course it was going to work for me. And so I never, I can't tell you a time, not one in 30 some years, where my toy partner has come to me and asked me to do something to help them that I didn't say yes right on the spot.
Good. Thank you. I don't think a lot of, Mike, sometimes I think a lot of inventors think it's like me against the company, and they're going to take advantage of me. But you realize, and I think if you're going to stay in an industry long enough, that there will be ups and downs, and that if you are a true partner, that you help each other, and through good things and maybe some tough times too. Is that correct?
You're right on target. I remember when Pound Puppies was introduced for its second big round. I developed it as miniature collectible line, little miniature plush and little play sets like Polly Pocket, where they were in the pound and out of it you could rescue them, and launched it with Galoob. And it shot up to number 1 in the small doll category. And then we introduced plush and everything else, and it was doing phenomenally well. And I was at a party in San Francisco that Galoob threw, a very personal one with the top echelon of the company. We were at actually the CEO's house, and he walked up to me at the event. He says, I really don't get you. And I said, what do you mean? And he said, all the other inventors that we deal with, they fight with us constantly. And he says, you don't do that. And I said, well, why would I fight with you? You're the one spending all the money and the time and the energy and everything to get my toy into the marketplace. And we're number 1 right now in our category. Why would I want to fight with you? And that really hit home with me the day that he said that. And that's where you've got to establish those relationships. I've had I'll give you an example. Yeah, there's a lot of toys that I've invented. And a couple of times, unfortunately, when toys get launched, things happen and their launch gets killed automatically. And I remember that happened with me once. We launched a line and had a big promotion for the launch, and Toys R Us was going to be the first person to sell it, and Toys R Us ran ads and had the TV commercials on and said, this Saturday is the launch of this line, and you're going to get, you can come in and get the first ones and everything. And the launch happened and there was no product on the shelves. The company messed up in some form or fashion and didn't get the product in time to get it on the shelves. And of course, Toys R Us was livid, and they said, that's it, we're not going to carry the product in. It just kind of killed it getting out of the gate. I didn't take a bad attitude with this guy. Whatever happened, I know it was something that he didn't want, the president of the company. And he's still one of my best friends today, and I've licensed 2 other concepts that he sold of mine since that day. So you got to maintain the relationships, and they'll benefit you for years to come. Besides that, it's a lot nicer getting along with people than arguing with them.
Well said. Thank you.
So where are we now on the pictures popping through there? You can go to the next one there, Andrew, and we'll share. I put that one in just for fun. I remembered when I was sitting in my office and I got a call. My secretary buzzed me and she says, it's Oprah Winfrey on the line for you. And I went, what? And she got on the line with me and she said, I'd like to invite you to be on our show. And she says, we'll take care of you, bring you in, put you up, all those kinds of things. And she says, we're doing a show on inventing. And what we're going to have is we're going to have 2 successful inventors. And then we're going to have 2 inventors that invented and fell flat on their face and lost everything. And so we're going to have them talk to the audience about the 2 different experiences. And so I felt bad for the guy that I was sitting back with in the green room that had, had an idea and then and it didn't work. I don't mean that he lost it all, that he was, down and out, but that the idea didn't go forward. But that was a fun experience. And another time I got to pinch myself. The next day after I shot the show, a good friend of mine was sitting in my office with me, and my secretary buzzed me again, and she said, "It's Oprah Winfrey again for you." And I told my buddy, I said, "Hold on just a second. Oprah's on the line for me." And she had called back to thank me for being on her show. So I thought it was a real class act on her part. And I got to tell my buddy to wait while I talked to Oprah.
Really nice.
A bunch of the pictures we're just going through now are a lot of the different toys that I came up with and I licensed. And the reason I want to show those, it was like the story I was telling you about the company. The birthstone babies, if you see, it's Hornby Hobbies. I couldn't get a licensee for it in the United States. Nobody wanted it. But I called up the guy that had sold Pound Puppies for me, and he took it and launched it in the UK. And so those friendships that I had, gave me the ability to be able to, in a lot of cases, get some of my new ideas in the marketplace. Now, don't misunderstand. They still would turn me down. I told you a funny story about one turn down that I got, Stephen and Andrew, before it started. But I got turned down more times than they said yes. But because of the relationships I had with them, they would give me an audience at least to come in and present my concept.
Mike, I love that you're saying that, because what it means is when somebody works on a project and they reach out to 30 companies, reaching out with that first project, they're establishing that relationship, and then they can say, "Oh, are you open to more?" And they say yes. So it doesn't mean that you have to have a Pound Puppies type success to use submitting ideas as a tool to create those relationships. And it can mean projects they turn down, but you're easy enough to work with. You didn't have a chip on your shoulder, they turn one of the products down, what have you. Would you say that's true? You don't have to have a success to benefit from submitting and creating relationships.
Oh, no, you do not have to, because I want you to think about it. Pound Puppies wasn't successful and I got rejected, but I still went in and I made my presentations, and I had that opportunity, and I thanked them for giving me their time to be able to present it to them. But yes, you're absolutely right. You don't have to have a winner to get in the door with the other ones. I was just making the point that maintaining those, just when you burn a bridge, you burn a bridge. So there's nothing to be gained by burning bridges, in my opinion, when you're in an industry where there's so many different players in that industry that you want to be able to call on and show your concepts to them. That was Bow Wow Boutique. You can just flash through some of these fairly quickly for them to see. Some people might remember them, Lost and Founds. You can go ahead, and Ocean Friends. And
Mike, it seemed like you stayed in the plush.
You know what? And you're right, because for some reason, because of the success that I'd had with the plush, you'll see a few as we go down through here that are not plush, but there's another plush, Chubby Puppies and Chubby Kitties. But a lot of my my items were plush. I did a few boys items. I was more successful girls items. This is Splashlings. This is an Ocean Full of Friends. That's one that's just recently been in the marketplace for us, and did quite well.
Wait a minute. You're still inventing?
Oh yeah. I still, what else I've done on this shutdown is when I've been digging through my warehouse, I've been seeing some of my old ideas I presented that they rejected 10 or 15 years ago, and I'm redoing them, and I'm going to get them out and present them again, with today's features in them. versus what they would have had 15 years ago.
Nice.
So yeah, oh
So,
yeah, my
so,
passion is creating.
so you don't have to stop?
No, nope, you don't have to stop, and not if the thing that I love is the creative process. And I'll give you an example. The splashlings here, and I've got another mermaid line that I had done also in here. But you know how I got the idea for the mermaid line? I was walking down the beach with my granddaughter. This was many years ago, and was picking up a shell and trying to let her teaching her to listen to the shell. Told her she could hear the ocean in it, and she listened to it, and she looked up at me and she said, "Poppy, what lives inside of seashells?" I said, "Mermaids do." And she said, "No, they're big like us." And I said, "No, they're not. That's just fables and stories. Real mermaids are tiny and live inside of seashells." And she was just in awe then, trying to peek in the shell and everything. And when I got back to the house, I thought, well, that's not a bad idea. Let's set ourselves apart in the mermaid world the same way that we set ourselves apart in the puppy world. And our theory was, and our theme, I'm sorry, not theory, our theme was mermaids are really tiny and live inside of seashells. They're not. Real mermaids are tiny and live inside of seashells. That was our pitch.
Nice.
And so it did quite well with the girls. There's an item, tiny tagalongs, plush, that I did many years ago. And there's the Waverly and the Magic Seashell. That was a different mermaid line that I did that was quite successful. And then Woodland Tuckers. Irwin sold that for me in Canada. I couldn't get anybody to take it in the States. And, I'll tell you, with the little time we got here, I think this is an important point to make. I had an inventor call me a few days ago and proceeded to tell me this story, big long story, that was the background for the toy that they had invented. And I shared with them what happened to me many years ago when I presented Woodland Tuckers. I went in and presented Woodland Tuckers. Now, what Woodland Tuckers are, they're creatures that live in the wood. As you see, they're kind of hobbit looking. And they had outfits on that had pockets all over them. And the storyline that I had with it was that it came in to the town at nighttime when everybody was asleep, and they picked through the trash and they picked things out and took them back, and they built their world with the items that they got, kind of Rube Goldberg. And when I presented it to the guy, great guy, Howard Bollinger at Kenner, he's no longer there. Howard looked at me and he says, "Mike, I've got 26 seconds. And I said, "What do you mean?" He said, "I've got 26 seconds with a TV commercial to explain what the toy is to the point the child will go over and yank on mom's skirt and say, 'Mom, I want that.'" He said, "There are two types of toys that are in the marketplace. There are toys that are based on entertainment, the Smurfs, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. And then there are toys that are based on features, that there's a component about them where you don't need 26 TV episodes." And he said, "So this is a great story. You go get somebody to produce 26 episodes and we'll be interested in taking the line." So if you build too big of a storyline around it, that's what you're going to hear in this day and age. And, the inventor had even told me that, the toy might make a great cartoon show, but you have to do that. And cartoons nowadays are so tough to even get done.
Okay.
So the product needs to stand up on its own.
Yes,
basically.
the product has to stand on its own to the point to where in 26 seconds they get it. That was a line of mine there, Extreme Pets. There was a boy one for you for a change. And I had the concept before it came out on what your pets are doing at home when you're gone. It's a comic book that came with each one of these, and this was out many years ago, before that movie came out. And the storyline was that these pets are at home and they have owners, and each one of their owners does an extreme sport, whatever it is here. So when the kids went off to school, the pets grabbed all the things that the kids used, and they were experts within that category for themselves when they got together and got out there. Appy Pets is a product that I did with I wasn't the inventor of it, but I worked with the inventors on the line, and then I put in my 2 cents worth on things that we could do with the line. That's the other reason I wanted to show these last toys that you're seeing here. These are all joint venture toys that I did with other inventors. And that's another thing where if you've got great relationships, you can work with other inventors to get toys out there. You know, you put 2 or 3 great minds together, and at the end of the day, you're going to come out with something good and get in the marketplace. Disgusting Designs, Zombie Art Studio. That was a joint venture I did with a dear friend and partner of mine from many years ago, Paul Von Moore, and great guy.
Do you have any advice for when you're doing a joint venture that the 2 partners have different skills or the same skills, or what to look for in a partner or joint venture partner?
You know, you have to find someone that's in the same place where you are. The people that I'm working with, and you know, I didn't get into doing joint ventures until many years after I was in the business, because I started meeting inventors. And the guy that originally I hired him, and he worked for me, and then he got so good and smart he went out on his own, and then he came back, and we've been working on stuff jointly together since then, and it's worked out nice. The advice I would give to someone is make sure that you're on an equal plane as far as knowledge and stuff for the industry.
Mm-hmm. Makes sense.
Fistful of Aliens. That was another boys item. That was a joint venture that we did. And Super Sketch Projector, another joint venture toy.
Hey, Mike, how many toy fairs have you been to? Trade shows?
I missed my first one this year in 36 years, but I mean the New York one, I should say, the New York Toy Fair. Back in the 80s, I would be gone for over 60 days because I had licensed it all over the world. So I would go on the European circuit of toy shows, and they had them staged, so it was one right after the other. You know, you went to London, then you went to Germany, then you went to Milan, then you went to Nuremberg, and I've never stopped to count how many that I've been to. But it's a great thing for inventors to do and go. I've been advising another inventor on an item that they had developed, and they decided they were going to go to the toy fair this year and just walk the floors. And they got into some conversation with some different people, and they called me afterwards, and they said it was great to be at the toy show and walk through, and that's the business. And you gotta get out there and meet people in the business world and stuff. Let me go back to one thing you asked me earlier, and it may have come out wrong when I was saying find someone with equal talent. It's to do a joint venture. I didn't really mean it that way. Really, the best thing that you can do is find someone where you complement each other, and in different areas, and putting those different, because everybody's different, and putting those components together, you can come up with some success.
Okay. We're coming up on the hour. We got a few questions that people have typed in. While we're answering some of these questions, it's very good. Everybody could type in their thank you for Mike. Make it more than just the words thank you. Like write something from your heart, as far as the fact that he's taken a whole hour to share his knowledge and his experience with you guys. First question is from Ben. What kind of protection, if any, did you get, Mike, before approaching companies? What did you do in the past? What do you do now? I know the toy business is a little different. with intellectual property than other industries, but what do you do?
You know, the first thing I did when I got the idea for Pound Puppies, I went and met with an intellectual property attorney, and I went down there and I said, "Oh, I got this great idea. I'm going to make these dogs. They're going to be Pound Puppies. I'm going to put them in a box like they're from the pound. The kids can name them. They can do all that." And he looked across the desk at me and he says, "You can't own an idea." Every time I tell people that, there's dead silence. He said, "You can own copyrights and trademarks, patents if it's patentable, design patents. There's a lot of things you can do, you know, to own the property. And then once you own it, you can show it to somebody. And then if they're interested in it, you own it, and they have to pay if they want to use it." So I go out and immediately get a minimum amount of protection with that, up to and including just going to the attorney is establishing the fact of what your idea is. Call it a poor man's patent, and it's in a file with an attorney, and they can give you great advice on what to do from protection, because different items require different types of protection.
Mm-hmm. This next one's from Mary. "You seem like the nicest guy in the world, exclamation mark. What is the most important part of maintaining a relationship in the toy industry?" Which is kind of the topic tonight. So if you had to choose the most important part, what do you think?
Honesty. Honesty and sincerity are the most. I had a toy company that called me and asked me to, they said, "We've got an opportunity to sell 100,000 Pound Puppy vans in the UK, but they want a reduced price. We'll cut our profit margin. Can you cut your royalty rate in half?" I said, "Absolutely. I want the 100,000 unit sale." When I got my royalty report, they had made a mistake and they paid me full royalty on it. I had a check cut, and I called up the guy in accounting and I says, "I'm sending a check back to you. You paid me too much." He said, "Mike, in 30 years, I've been an accountant in the toy industry. Nobody has ever sent us a check back off of a royalty statement." But it wasn't fair. They sold that 100,000 units for me over the deal we made, and it wasn't fair for me to just take that money when they'd made the deal. So I think honesty is important, and sincerity. And people know if you're sincere when you're talking to them and meeting with them.
Mm-hmm. Simon has a question on topic for tonight. Has Mike ever had to walk away from any toxic business relationships, or has he always had positive relationships?
I've had, I've had a couple of toxic employee relationships, and so I've had to. I hired full-time designers, and sometimes they're off in never land, and so I just use independent contractors now in that. And you know what? There are some toy companies that I won't present to because of their reputation and what I've heard they've done to some other inventors and stuff, and I just stay away from them. I don't want that or need that.
Okay,
that's fair enough.
I'm going to read some thank yous. I'll send you all the thank yous, Mike, but I'm going to read a few. This first one's from Simon. "Thanks, Mike, for sharing your personal history and experience. Really valuable insights and very inspiring to see how passionate you continue to be." Damali, "Thank you, Mike. I had 3 pound puppies and still love them. They're adorable." That's cool. This one is from, his name is also Mike. "This was an absolutely incredible story, Mike. Thank you so much for sharing." Brad says, "Mike, you are truly an inspiration. Thank you for sharing your expertise and all of your products with us." April says, "Such a great webinar. Thank you so much. I love seeing the original handmade pound puppies and woodland tuckers." I know April, and she is a toy inventor as well, so I know she's probably very inspired. There's just a ton of them here. I'll send them off to you, Mike. And okay. I'm sorry we couldn't get to everybody's questions because there's so many in there, but we did get to a few of them. Stephen, anything you want to say in closing?
What I really love about this story is that Mike is still inventing. And I got into this business back in my early 20s because I knew if I found something I truly loved to do, that I would probably do it forever. And there was no reason ever to retire if you really love what you do. And I think hearing Mike tonight talk about his love of inventing and the relationships, and he's still in the game today. And I'm really glad to hear that because I feel the exact same way. So thank you very much, Mike.
Well, thank you, and I appreciate you guys giving me the opportunity to be on the show tonight. I enjoy sharing with other inventors that are trying to get their breaks in toy invention world or whatever world they're in inventing.
The one thing I have to mention, everyone, he has so many stories. He didn't even scratch the surface tonight because he told me some stories before we came on that were the funniest stories I've ever heard. So, Mike, we've got to have you back. I want to dig a little deeper, maybe later, on some of those funny stories because they're real, and you have such knowledge that you can pass on to the next generation. So I cannot thank you enough.
Okay, well, thank you, Stephen. I'd love to come on again.
Thank you so much, Mike. Very inspirational. Take
Thank
care,
you.
everybody, and
Thank
keep
you.
inventing. Bye.
Good night, everybody.
Good night.